I'm Eleanor Hayes, 34 years old, an ER nurse and single mom to an 8-year-old girl with the brightest laugh you've ever heard. 2 months ago, I asked my parents, her grandparents, to watch her for just 3 nights while I worked back-to-back emergency shifts. Instead, they left her at a CPS office like lost luggage and boarded a flight to St. Lucia with my sister's family. Chloe cried herself to sleep that night in a stranger's house, thinking I had abandoned her. That morning, I found a note on their kitchen counter. No phone call, no explanation, just, "Contact CPS if you want to make arrangements." What happened next tore apart everything I thought I knew about family and rebuilt something stronger. Before I tell you what I did, let me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to choose between protecting your child and keeping the peace. Hit like and subscribe. This story is for you. Life before this nightmare. It was challenging, yes, but in ways I could manage. Predictable chaos, if you will. I was a single mom, an ER nurse, and proud of both. Chloe came into this world 8 years ago, a beautiful, unexpected burst of joy during my final year of nursing school. Her father, Marcus, and I had been married just a year when those 2 pink lines appeared on the pregnancy test. We were young, scared, barely out of our own adolescence, but fiercely committed to making it work. Marcus was finishing his business degree, and honestly, we relied heavily on my parents' financial and occasional emotional support during those early years. From the moment they placed Chloe in my arms, she became my world, my universe. She has this infectious laugh, you know. It starts as a tiny conspiratorial giggle, barely audible, then crescendos into full, unrestrained belly laughter that's so genuine it makes everyone around her smile, even on the toughest days. Her curly auburn hair is perpetually escaping whatever hairstyle I attempt in the mornings, a wild, fiery halo that perfectly matches her spirit. And her eyes, they're these thoughtful, deep green pools that seem to process everything, taking in the world with an intensity that belies her age. Despite my grueling ER schedule, the long shifts, the unpredictable emergencies, we always maintained our special rituals. Sunday morning pancakes, thick and fluffy, drowned in maple syrup, with extra chocolate chips for Chloe. Bedtime stories, no matter how late my shift ran, even if it meant I was half asleep, slurring words as I read from her favorite fantasy books. And our brave talk, that was our most sacred ritual. Every night before lights out, we'd share one thing that scared us that day. It could be anything, a monster under the bed, a big test at school, or even just the dark. It was our way of acknowledging fear, processing it, and facing it together. Things changed when Marcus's marketing career took off. The late nights at the office became more frequent. The business trips, initially a novelty, then a routine. I started to notice the first signs about 3 years ago. The faint, unfamiliar perfume clinging to his shirts, a scent that wasn't mine, wasn't anything I wore. The defensive, almost aggressive responses to simple questions about his day. The emotional distance that grew into a gaping chasm between us. When I finally confronted him, my heart pounding with a sickening dread, armed with undeniable evidence of his affair with a coworker, he didn't even try to deny it. Not a single word of remorse, just a shrug and a request for a quick, clean break. Our divorce was finalized quickly, almost clinically. Marcus agreed to monthly visits with Chloe, though they rarely materialized, often replaced by flimsy excuses or last-minute cancellations. And child support? It arrived, eventually, irregularly at best, a constant source of stress and uncertainty in my already tight budget. But I was fine. I had Chloe. I had my job. We were a team. My parents, Richard and Evelyn, had always been a complex, sometimes overwhelming presence in my life. My father, Richard, had built a successful accounting firm from the ground up, a testament to his sharp mind and relentless ambition. It afforded them a comfortable, lavish retirement in their sprawling suburban home. My mother, Evelyn, had spent years as an elementary school principal, a strict but respected figure, before joining him in retirement. To friends and neighbors, they presented themselves as the absolute pillars of family values, community involvement, and genteel Southern charm. They were the couple who hosted perfect holiday parties, whose house always looked like it belonged on a magazine cover, whose grandchildren were always impeccably dressed and well-behaved. But behind closed doors, the dynamic was very, very different. My younger sister, Isabel, 4 years my junior, had always been their obvious favorite. From the moment she was born, she seemed to embody their every expectation, their carefully plotted life plan. Prestigious college, a well-placed internship, followed by a storybook marriage to Bradley, a successful corporate attorney with a gleaming law firm downtown, and of course, 2 perfect children. 10-year-old Ethan, all athletic prowess and academic awards, and 6-year-old Olivia, a charming, precocious little sprite with a penchant for elaborate princess dresses. Isabel became a part-time interior designer for wealthy clients, a career that allowed her to maintain her image as both a sophisticated career woman and a devoted, hands-on mother, a delicate balance she performed with practiced ease. The favoritism wasn't always blatant, not a shouted declaration, but it was consistent enough to create a deeply ingrained pattern that Chloe and I, no matter how hard we tried to ignore it, simply couldn't. It was in the details, the microaggressions, that chipped away at my daughter's self-esteem, leaving her confused and questioning her own worth. When Ethan got the latest, most expensive gaming system for his birthday, a gift my parents had excitedly sourced months in advance, Chloe received a clearance book and craft set, something picked up on a whim during a grocery run. When Olivia had her first ballet recital, my parents drove 3 hours, booked a luxurious hotel suite for the weekend, and brought a professional photographer to capture every delicate pirouette. When Chloe had her piano recital the very next month, the email invitation having been sent weeks prior, they were unfortunately committed to a neighborhood potluck. "Oh, sweetie, we are just so sorry," my mother had cooed over the phone, the words hollow, devoid of genuine regret. "But you know how important it is to support the neighborhood." Holiday gatherings were a particular minefield. Ethan and Olivia's favorite foods, a gourmet mac and cheese, elaborate custom-decorated cookies, would appear on the table with fanfare, announced by my mother with a flourish. The year Chloe was diagnosed with a gluten sensitivity, something I had meticulously explained and reminded my mother about multiple times, my mother served heaping platters of pasta, crusty rolls, and various casseroles laden with gluten, completely forgetting to prepare any alternatives. "Oh, I'm sure she can find something to eat, darling," Mom had said, waving a dismissive hand as Chloe picked forlornly at a plain salad, her small face trying so hard to hide the disappointment. I tried, countless times, to address these disparities, tactfully, carefully, always choosing my words with the precision of a surgeon. "Mom," I'd attempted during a quiet moment after Christmas 2 years ago, Madison's new wardrobe of expensive doll clothes scattered around us. "I notice you seem to make different efforts for Isabel's kids than for Chloe." I'd hoped for understanding, for a flicker of recognition. Instead, her eyes, usually so sharp, glazed over. "Don't be ridiculous, Eleanor," she'd replied, her voice saccharine as she meticulously arranged Olivia's new doll clothes. "We love all our grandchildren equally. It's not our fault that Isabel makes it easier to be involved." The implication hung in the air, thick and unspoken. I, Eleanor, was the difficult one. My life, my choices, my very existence, somehow made it harder for them to love my child. Last month, Metro General faced a severe staffing shortage, a devastating multi-car accident on the interstate, a horrific pileup that stretched for miles, had overwhelmed the hospital, bringing in wave after wave of critically injured patients. As one of the senior nurses, I was called in for 3 consecutive night shifts. My usual childcare provider, Lisa, a warm, reliable woman who had been with me for years, was visiting family out of state, leaving me with almost no options. Desperation gnawed at me, a cold, hard lump in my stomach. I called my parents. My voice was carefully measured, modulated to hide the sheer panic I felt. "I hate to ask this," I began, forcing a lightness I didn't feel, "but is there any chance you could watch Chloe for 3 nights? I've been called in for emergency shifts." The silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. It stretched, taut and uncomfortable, filled with their unspoken reluctance, their almost audible sighs. Before my father finally responded, his voice clipped, tinged with a familiar resentment. "Well, I suppose we could rearrange some things. When would you drop her off?" Relief, so potent it almost buckled my knees, flooded through me. Thank you so much. I can bring her over tonight around 6 hours. And I'd pick her up Friday morning, right after my shift ends. Fine, my mother said, her voice like a thin, sharp blade, cutting through my relief. Just make sure she brings her own entertainment. You know we don't have much for children her age here anymore. The words stung, a familiar dismissal, a reminder that Chloe wasn't quite welcome, just tolerated. But I pushed it down. I had no other options. Patients were depending on me. I spent the entire afternoon preparing, meticulously. I packed Chloe's favorite comfort items, her stuffed otter named Oliver, soft and worn from years of cuddles, the patchwork quilt her grandmother on Marcus's side had lovingly made, a riot of colors and textures, and the nightlight that projected a gentle galaxy of stars onto the ceiling, her comfort in the dark. I prepared labeled meals with simple reheating instructions, a detailed roster of her routine, emergency contacts, and her medication schedule for her occasional seasonal allergies. I double-checked everything, imagining every possible scenario, trying to anticipate every need. Be good for Grandma and Grandpa, okay? I told Chloe, as we pulled into their perfectly manicured driveway, the scent of fresh-cut grass heavy in the humid Virginia air. Remember, they have different rules than we do at home. Chloe, clutching Oliver tightly to her chest, nodded, her green eyes wide and earnest. I know, Mom. I'll be super helpful and quiet, just like they like. That statement should have broken my heart. It should have shattered me into a million pieces right there in the driveway. The raw, desperate plea for approval, the internalization of their subtle rejection. But at the time, I was just grateful. Grateful for the childcare, for the slim chance I could get through these shifts without collapsing from exhaustion and worry. I hugged her tightly, burying my face in her soft, curly hair, breathing in the sweet strawberry scent of her shampoo. I didn't know then. I couldn't possibly have known it would be days before I held her again, before I felt the reassuring weight of her small body in my arms. As I carried her small overnight bag into the house, my own backpack slung over my shoulder, I overheard my parents' hushed conversation from the kitchen. Their voices were low, conspiratorial, just barely audible. We'll have to tell her soon about the St. Lucia plans, my father was saying, his tone slightly agitated. Let's wait until after she leaves, my mother replied, her voice firm, resolute. No sense causing problems before we need to. I should have asked questions then. The hair on the back of my neck prickled, a warning bell chiming softly in the back of my mind. The mention of St. Lucia plans, combined with no sense causing problems before we need to, should have been a glaring red flag. I should have taken Chloe, spun on my heel, and left immediately. But the weight of my responsibilities, the knowledge that patients were depending on me, the crushing reality of no alternative childcare, pressed down, I convinced myself. I forced myself to believe they were discussing some future trip, something for next month or even later in the year. Not one that would begin while my daughter was in their care, entrusted to their supposed love and protection. My exhaustion, my desperation, clouded my judgment. I regret it to this day. The third night shift had been brutal, utterly, soul-crushingly brutal. A 5-car pileup on the highway, exacerbated by a sudden downpour, had brought in 15 trauma patients simultaneously, 15 lives hanging in the balance, 15 families waiting in agony. I hadn't sat down for more than 10 minutes in 12 hours. My scrubs were stiff with dried blood and sweat, my eyes burned, and every muscle in my body screamed in protest. All I could think about was getting home, collapsing into bed, and then, after a few hours of blessed sleep, going to pick up Chloe, imagining her infectious laugh, her sleepy morning cuddles, was the only thing that kept me going. I was finally, thankfully, changing out of my scrubs in the hospital locker room, my body aching with exhaustion, when my phone rang. Chloe's school number, Willow Creek Elementary, flashed on the screen. My heart, already thrumming from the adrenaline of the night, seemed to stop mid-beat. A cold dread, a premonition, washed over me. This wasn't right. School didn't call this early. Miss Hayes, this is Deborah from the front office at Willow Creek Elementary, a calm, professional voice said, though I could detect an undercurrent of concern. Chloe wasn't in class this morning, and we haven't received notification of her absence. What? My breath hitched, my mind reeled. struggling to process the words through the fog of exhaustion. What? She's staying with her grandparents, Richard and Evelyn Hayes. They should have dropped her off. We haven't seen Chloe today, Miss Hayes, Deborah replied, her voice growing more concerned. And no one has called her in absent from that number either. The cold dread solidified into a block of ice in my chest. Something was terribly wrong. I didn't even bother to fully change. I rushed out of the hospital, still wearing half my scrubs under my street clothes, my hair a wild mess, my heart pounding like a drum against my ribs. The 15-minute drive to my parents' home stretched into an eternity. Each traffic light felt like a deliberate taunt, each slow-moving car a personal insult. I tried calling both their cell phones repeatedly, the ringing echoing mockingly in my ear, then going straight to voicemail. No answer, not a single reply. I pulled into their driveway, the familiar perfectly manicured lawn looking alien, sinister in the bright morning light. My eyes immediately scanned for their cars. Both were gone. The driveway was empty. A sickening wave of nausea washed over me, using my emergency key, the one they'd given me years ago, just in case. I burst through the front door, shouting, "Chloe, Mom, Dad!" My calls echoed through the empty house, swallowed by the unnerving silence. Every room, meticulously tidy as always, was devoid of life, of any sign of my daughter. The kitchen counter, that's where I found it. A single sheet of notepaper, pristine white, with my mother's precise, elegant handwriting. No envelope, no explanation. Just a casual, almost apologetic dismissal. Samantha. They still called me Samantha, never Eleanor, a subtle way to infantilize me, to keep me in my place. Sorry, sweetie. We just couldn't take care of her. We've arranged for temporary placement until you're available again. They said you can contact Child Protective Services to make arrangements. Mom and Dad. No phone number, no location information. No explanation beyond that flimsy excuse. Just Mom and Dad at the bottom. My trembling hands could barely dial the phone. My fingers fumbled with the buttons as I contacted Child Protective Services CPS. The process was agonizing. Transferred 3 times, each person asking the same basic questions, each moment feeling like a lifetime. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I reached someone who could help me. A woman, her voice calm and steady, despite my frantic tone. Yes, we do have a record of a child named Chloe Hayes being placed in emergency foster care yesterday evening, the woman said, her words hitting me like physical blows. The guardians reported a temporary inability to provide care and requested placement services. They're her grandparents, not her guardians, I shouted, my voice rising, cracking with a raw, desperate fury I hadn't known I possessed. I'm her mother. I have full custody. I was working hospital shifts. They were babysitting. Ma'am, please try to stay calm, she interjected, her voice firm, bordering on impatient. I understand this is upsetting, but raising your voice won't help us resolve the situation faster. The detachment in her voice, the sheer bureaucratic indifference, was almost as infuriating as my parents' betrayal. It took 4 agonizing hours. 4 hours of phone calls, of painstaking verification of my identity, of frantic, tearful explanations of the circumstances. Finally, mercifully, I was connected with a social worker named Ms. Davis, who had been assigned to Chloe's case. Her voice, though professional, carried a note of genuine empathy. Your parents presented themselves as Chloe's legal guardians facing an emergency, Ms. Davis explained during our meeting at the CPS office, her eyes fixed on mine with a calm, steady gaze. They claimed they were unable to continue caring for her due to unforeseen circumstances, and that the mother, meaning you, was unavailable indefinitely. Unavailable indefinitely, I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth, incredulity bubbling up, threatening to overwhelm me. I was working hospital shifts, 3 nights. They knew exactly when I was picking her up. I gave them a detailed schedule. Ms. Davis nodded sympathetically, a flicker of something close to anger in her own eyes. We're certainly looking into why proper protocols weren't followed, Miss Hayes. The intake worker should have verified guardianship documentation and made extensive efforts to contact you before any placement. This is highly unusual. Where is my daughter now? I demanded, the question tearing from my throat, raw and urgent. Everything else faded away. All that mattered was Chloe. She's with the Rodriguez family, Ms. Davis said gently, pulling up a file on her tablet. They're one of our emergency placement homes. They're excellent caregivers, very kind people. I can take you there now. The Rodriguez home was a modest, ranch-style house with cheerful yellow trim, nestled on a quiet, tree-lined street. It exuded warmth, a stark contrast to the cold formality of the CPS office and the empty silence of my parents' house. Mrs. Rodriguez, a kind-faced woman in her 50s with a comforting smile, greeted us at the door. Her eyes, filled with compassion, instantly put me at ease, a fragile sense of hope flickering within me. "Chloe's in the backyard with my husband," she said gently, her voice soft. "She's been very quiet, poor thing." When I stepped onto the back patio, the warm afternoon sun on my face, I saw her, Chloe, my Chloe. She was sitting on a swing, gently swaying, half-heartedly tossing a bright red ball to Mr. Rodriguez, who sat patiently on a garden bench. Her curly hair was a little disheveled, and her small shoulders were slumped. She looked utterly lost. When she saw me, her head snapped up. Her eyes, those beautiful, thoughtful green eyes, widened. She dropped the ball, scrambling off the swing, and ran to me, colliding with my legs with such force I nearly lost my balance. "Mommy," her small body shook with sobs, deep, wrenching sounds that tore through me. I lifted her into my arms, holding her tightly, feeling the delicate tremble of her small frame. "I thought you weren't coming back for me." "Not coming back?" I looked at her tear-streaked face in confusion, my own eyes welling up. "Sweetheart, I would never leave you. I was just working at the hospital, remember? My shifts were long, but I promised I'd be back." Between hiccuping sobs, Chloe revealed fragments of what had happened. My parents had told her I had called them. They told her I had said I needed to take care of something very important, something that would keep me away, and that I wouldn't be back for a while. They had packed a small bag for her, driven her to a strange office, and left her with people she didn't know. Grandma said, "Sometimes mommies need breaks," Chloe whispered against my neck, her voice barely audible, filled with a crushing weight of perceived abandonment. She said, "You might need a long one." As Mrs. Rodriguez gently explained the circumstances of Chloe's arrival, another horrifying detail emerged, a final cruel twist of the knife. "Your parents never mentioned that Chloe had a mother who would be returning in a few days, Miss Hayes," she said, her voice filled with quiet indignation. "They presented it as if they were her primary caregivers and were facing some emergency that prevented them from continuing care. They indicated you were out of the picture, perhaps indefinitely." My parents, my own parents, they had deliberately erased me. They had told my daughter I had abandoned her. They had lied to the state, to foster services, to strangers, to justify their own selfish desire for a vacation. After settling Chloe with a snack and some cartoons that Mrs. Rodriguez had kindly switched on, ensuring she was comfortable and distracted, I stepped back into the kitchen. My hands still trembled as I pulled out my phone. A notification had appeared, glowing mockingly on the screen. A tagged photo on Isabel's social media account. The image was a punch to the gut. It showed my parents on a sun-drenched beach, my sister Isabel, her husband Bradley, and their children, Ethan and Olivia. All of them, my parents included, wearing matching Hawaiian shirts and leis, their faces beaming with wide, unrestrained smiles. Cocktails in the adults' hands. The caption, a sickeningly cheerful declaration, read, "Surprise family vacation. So blessed to have grandparents who drop everything to make memories with us. Ohana time, pack your family first." The timestamp. That's what solidified the betrayal. It showed it had been posted yesterday evening, approximately the exact same time they would have been dropping Chloe at social services. Further scrolling revealed multiple photos, a nauseating parade of their blessed life. My father teaching Ethan to snorkel, his arm around his favorite grandson. My mother building elaborate sandcastles with Olivia, her smile wide and genuine. Sunset dinner reservations at an exclusive oceanfront restaurant, a table laden with gourmet food. The trip had clearly been planned well in advance, months probably. Not the impulsive decision their flimsy note had implied. Not a sudden emergency. This was deliberate, calculated. A text from Isabel glowed on the screen, a new message. "Mom and Dad are spoiling the kids rotten in St. Lucia. Olivia got her hair braided with beads today, and Ethan's learning to surf. Aren't they the best grandparents ever? I turned my phone face down on the counter, unable to look anymore, the cheerful glow of the screen a mockery of my shattered world. Mrs. Rodriguez placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, her touch warm and comforting. "Your daughter asked me last night if she had done something wrong," she said quietly, her voice full of sorrow. She wanted to know why her grandparents love her cousins more than her. The control I had maintained throughout this nightmare, the iron grip I had kept on my emotions, finally began to crack. A strangled sound escaped my throat. "How do I even answer that?" I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears. "With truth appropriate to her age, Miss Hayes," Mrs. Rodriguez replied, her gaze unwavering. "And with love that leaves no room for doubt." She hesitated before continuing, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "I should tell you, when the grandparents dropped her off, they never mentioned having a mother who could return. The intake form they filled out indicated mother unavailable, with no further explanation. If they had said you were simply working shifts, that you would be back in a few days, this placement would never have happened. Not like this." The calculated nature of their betrayal crystallized in that moment. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't poor judgment due to stress or an oversight. This was deliberate abandonment, a cold, calculated decision to fulfill their own desires, their own carefully curated image, with no regard whatsoever for the unimaginable trauma they were inflicting on an innocent, trusting child. It was beyond cruel. It was monstrous. The next morning began with a formal interview at the CPS office. Ms. Davis, my social worker, recorded my statement about the precise timeline of events, from arranging childcare with my parents to the horrifying discovery of Chloe's abandonment. Her pen moved steadily across her notepad, each scratch of ink a stark record of their perfidy. "What we're dealing with here, Miss Hayes, is potential child abandonment and filing false statements to a government agency," Ms. Davis explained, her gaze firm. "Your parents misrepresented themselves as Chloe's legal guardians and provided false information about your availability. This is serious." "What happens now?" I asked, my voice still raw from the previous day's emotional ringer, but edged with a new, fierce determination. "We're expediting the paperwork to release Chloe back into your custody," she assured me. "It should be completed by this afternoon. As for pursuing any action against your parents, that would be your decision. We can provide you with resources for legal counsel." Leaving Miss Davis's office, my mind a whirlwind of anger and a desperate need for justice, I called my friend Sarah. Sarah worked as a family court attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense advocate who had guided me through my divorce. "They did what?" Sarah's voice rose in disbelief as I explained the horrifying situation, her usual calm demeanor dissolving into outrage. "Ellie, that's not just morally reprehensible, that's potentially criminal. Child abandonment, filing false reports, possibly even custodial interference. This is huge. What would happen if I reported this officially?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, the weight of the question settling heavily in the air between us. The thought of taking legal action against my own parents was daunting, almost unthinkable, but the image of Chloe's tear-streaked face, her whispered words about me not coming back, solidified my resolve. "It depends on the jurisdiction, and whether prosecutors believe there's enough evidence for charges," Sarah explained, her lawyer brain kicking in, already cataloging potential statutes. "But making a formal report creates a permanent record, which could be incredibly important if there are future incidents. And honestly, it's a matter of accountability. What they did was egregious." Sarah promised to research the specific statutes and penalties under Virginia law and get back to me immediately. In the meantime, I faced the hardest conversation yet, explaining to Chloe why she couldn't come home with me immediately. During our visit at the Rodriguez home, I sat with her on the floor of her temporary room, her small hand clutched in mine. "The people at the office need to finish some important papers first, sweetie," I told her, trying to keep my voice steady, reassuring. "Mrs. Rodriguez will take good care of you until then, and I'll be back this afternoon to take you home. Promise." "Promise?" Chloe's small voice cracked, her green eyes wide with a fragile hope, a painful echo of her earlier fear. "I promise, sweetie. Nothing could keep me from coming back for you, ever." I brought her favorite stuffed animal, Oliver, her own soft pillow, and a handful of photos from home, to make her temporary stay more comfortable. Mrs. Rodriguez assured me they would maintain her routine as closely as possible, a small comfort in the sea of chaos. Leaving her again, even knowing it was temporary, felt like a physical pain, a tearing sensation in my chest. Each step away from that warm, comforting home was a conscious effort, dragging my heavy feet, knowing I was leaving a piece of my heart behind. In the car, finally alone in the quiet confines of my vehicle, I allowed myself a moment of breakdown. The dam burst. Sobs, raw and guttural, tore from my throat as I pounded my fists on the steering wheel, the anger, grief, and betrayal consuming me. Tears streamed down my face, blurring my vision, hot and stinging. But then, as quickly as it came, the wave receded. I couldn't afford to stay broken, not yet, not while Chloe needed me. I pulled myself together, literally wiping the tears from my face, taking deep, shuddering breaths, steeling myself to continue handling the crisis. The school needed to be updated, my work schedule adjusted, and most importantly, Chloe's emotional well-being addressed. I called Jennifer, my supervisor at the hospital. She was tough but fair and knew my dedication. "Take whatever time you need, Eleanor," Jennifer said after hearing a condensed, almost clinical version of events, her voice surprisingly gentle. "We'll shift your schedule to part-time when you're ready to return. Family comes first, especially in a situation like this. We'll cover your shifts. Don't even think about it." Her unexpected compassion was a lifeline, a small flicker of warmth in the cold, desolate landscape of my reality. I spent the rest of the afternoon researching child abandonment laws, the legal jargon cold and unforgiving. I learned that my parents' actions could potentially result in misdemeanor or even felony charges, depending on how prosecutors viewed the case. The deliberate nature of their actions, falsifying information to social services, the pre-planned vacation, all strengthened potential legal consequences. With Sarah's guidance, I began a detailed documentation process. I created a meticulous timeline of events, from the initial phone call asking them to watch Chloe to the horrifying discovery of her abandonment. I saved screenshots of Isabel's social media posts, a digital trail of breadcrumbs proving the pre-planned nature of the St. Lucia trip. And heartbreakingly, I recorded Chloe's account of what my parents had told her, her small voice reliving the terror of being left with strangers. Chloe's school counselor, Mr. Powell, offered valuable advice during our phone consultation. His voice was calm, empathetic. "Children often internalize abandonment as their fault, Miss Hayes," he explained, his words echoing my deepest fears for Chloe. "It's crucial to repeatedly reinforce that this was an adult decision that had absolutely nothing to do with her behavior or worthiness. She needs to know without a shadow of a doubt that she is loved, wanted, and cherished." "Will she recover from this?" I asked, voicing my deepest, most raw fear. The thought of this trauma scarring Chloe permanently was unbearable. "Children are remarkably resilient when they have consistent, loving support," he assured me, his voice firm with conviction. "With proper validation, open communication, and possibly some counseling, Chloe can process this experience without long-term trauma. It will take time, but she is strong." By late afternoon, Ms. Davis called. Her voice was cheerful, a welcome sound after the emotional turmoil of the past 24 hours. "The paperwork is complete, Miss Hayes. You can pick up Chloe now. We'll need you both to come in tomorrow morning to finalize some additional documentation, but she's officially released back to your custody." The reunion was tear-filled, but oh so healing. Chloe launched herself into my arms, burying her face in my shoulder, her small body shaking with quiet relief rather than sobs. Mrs. Rodriguez had prepared Chloe's favorite dinner as a goodbye celebration, a simple but heartfelt gesture that touched me deeply. And Mr. Rodriguez, bless his kind heart, had even fixed her backpack strap that had broken during the hasty packing. "You have my number, Miss Hayes," Mrs. Rodriguez told me quietly at the door, her eyes glistening. "If either of you need anything at all, please call. We'll be keeping you both in our prayers." Their compassion, their genuine care for a child they had known for less than 24 hours, stood in stark contrast to the callousness of my own parents. They were strangers, yet they had shown more humanity than my own flesh and blood. That night, as Chloe slept peacefully in her own bed, clutching Oliver tightly, the soft glow of her star nightlight filling the room, I made another call to Detective Miller at the police department. He was a colleague, in a roundabout way, a detective specializing in family crimes, whom I'd met through a few cases at the ER. His calm, methodical approach had always impressed me. Based on what you've described, Eleanor, there could be grounds for criminal charges, he confirmed after hearing the agonizing details. The premeditated nature, crossing state lines, and the false statements to CPS all elevate the seriousness of this. This isn't a simple misunderstanding. What would that process look like? I asked, my voice steady, resolute. The anger that had been simmering within me had solidified into a cold, hard resolve. You'd file a formal complaint, he explained, his tone professional. We'd investigate and gather evidence, then present our findings to the district attorney, who decides whether to press charges. Given that your parents are currently in St. Lucia, there would be interstate coordination involved. It won't be quick, but it's certainly actionable. Further investigation, spearheaded by Detective Miller's team and fueled by my own furious research, revealed the full extent of their pre-planning. My parents had booked their St. Lucia vacation 3 months earlier. According to the confirmation email Isabel had inadvertently included in a social media post showing their luxury resort accommodations, the trip was locked in long before I had even called them about Chloe. They had made a deliberate choice not to find alternative childcare for Chloe, opting instead to abandon her to strangers. Isabel's complicity, though perhaps born more of blissful ignorance and self-absorption than malicious intent, became clearer through her social media timeline. The surprise family vacation had been discussed in countless posts dating back weeks, with references to shopping for tropical outfits, coordinating activities, and counting down the days. Armed with this information, I contacted the St. Lucia authorities, providing their resort information and flight details, all discovered through Isabel's shameless oversharing online. Rather than acting impulsively, fueled by pure emotion, I methodically built a case. Every step was calculated, precise, driven by a quiet fury that provided clarity and purpose. My focus was singular: protecting Chloe while pursuing accountability for those who had so callously betrayed her trust. The morning after bringing Chloe home, my phone exploded. Isabel's name flashed repeatedly on the screen, followed by a string of furious, increasingly unhinged text messages. "What the hell are you doing? Police came to the hotel asking questions about Mom and Dad. You're ruining our vacation over nothing. They watch your kid all the time. So they needed a break and called social services instead of bothering you at work. You're always so dramatic. It was just for a week." When I didn't respond immediately, she called. Her voice, shrill with indignation and entitlement, shrieked through the speaker. "Have you completely lost your mind, Eleanor? Do you know how much this trip cost? Ethan and Olivia are terrified. Police took their grandparents away. Is that what you wanted? To traumatize my children over your petty jealousy?" I maintained an eerie, almost terrifying calm. My voice, when I finally spoke, was low, steady, a stark contrast to her hysterics. "They abandoned my child to strangers, Isabel. They lied to authorities about being her guardians. They told Chloe I might not come back for her. This isn't about jealousy. This is about what they did." "Oh, please," Isabel scoffed, her voice dripping with dismissive contempt. "Chloe always exaggerates. Mom and Dad would never say that. She's making it up." "The foster mother confirmed it," I countered, each word a cold, hard fact. "The intake forms confirmed it. The social worker confirmed it. They explicitly stated I was unavailable indefinitely. They left her to believe she was abandoned. That's not exaggeration, Isabel. That's fact." "Well, now you've got police harassing us on our family vacation," she wailed, quickly shifting the blame back to me. "Ethan and Olivia are crying because police took their grandparents away. Is that what you wanted? To traumatize my children over your petty jealousy? You're sick, Eleanor." What Isabel failed to comprehend, what she was utterly incapable of grasping, was that this had never been about jealousy. It wasn't about vacation envy or material possessions, or the perceived inequity of our childhoods. This was about protecting a child, my child, from people who had demonstrated in the cruelest possible way that they viewed her as disposable, an inconvenience to be discarded when something more desirable came along. The family fracture widened, deep and irreparable, as news spread like wildfire. Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, who had always been somewhat distant from the main family, a quiet observer of their carefully constructed facade, called unexpectedly. Her voice was gentle, tinged with a familiar weariness. "I heard what happened to Chloe," she said, without preamble, her words landing with quiet force. "And Eleanor, I'm not surprised. Your mother did similar things to me growing up, always preferring your Uncle David, making excuses to leave me behind for holidays, for family gatherings. She's always been good at rewriting history." I had no idea, I admitted, genuine surprise coloring my voice. My mother had always cultivated an image of perfect familial devotion. "No one talks about it, dear, because your mother is so good at rewriting history, making everyone believe her version," Patricia sighed, a lifetime of unspoken hurt in her voice. "But I wanted you to know. I support whatever action you take. This cycle needs to end somewhere. For Chloe's sake, and for yours." Her unexpected support from a forgotten aunt was a small, quiet affirmation, a moment of solidarity that bolstered my resolve. That afternoon, I met with Detective Miller to formally file child abandonment and neglect charges. The process was emotionally draining. Each question a fresh stab of pain, each detail a stark reminder of Chloe's suffering. But it was also empowering. Each signature, each official statement, each piece of evidence I presented felt like reclaiming control over a situation where I had initially been powerless, utterly blindsided by their betrayal. "Interstate cases can be complex, Eleanor," Detective Miller warned, his expression grim. "The St. Lucia authorities will coordinate with us, but there may be jurisdictional questions about where certain offenses occurred, particularly the initial abandonment. It might take time." "I understand it might be complicated," I replied, my voice firm, unwavering. "But I need to see this through, for Chloe's sake. She deserves justice. She deserves to know that what they did was wrong, unequivocally wrong." Each night after Chloe fell asleep, tucked safely in her bed, her breathing even and calm, I wrote in a journal, pouring out the rage, the grief, the profound sense of betrayal I couldn't express during daylight hours, when I needed to be strong, steady, and reassuring for her. The pages became tear-stained testimonies to emotions too raw, too volatile to share with anyone else. It was my outlet, my silent scream into the void. Dr. Thompson, a child psychologist recommended by Mr. Powell, began seeing Chloe twice weekly. Her gentle, patient approach quickly put Chloe at ease. After their first session, Dr. Thompson requested a private conversation with me. "Chloe shared something concerning today, Eleanor," Dr. Thompson said gently, her brow furrowed with worry. "She says her grandparents told her that sometimes mommies go away and don't come back, and that you might be too busy with important things to return for her." The calculated cruelty of those words stole my breath. It was a physical blow, a visceral punch to the gut. They said that, to an 8-year-old, to my daughter, to justify their vacation. The sheer malice, the deliberate attempt to sever the most fundamental bond, was incomprehensible. "Children rarely fabricate specific statements like that, Eleanor," Dr. Thompson confirmed, her voice empathetic but firm. "I believe she's reporting what was actually said to her. This will take time to unpack, but it's crucial we address this foundational betrayal of trust." Maintaining professional composure at work became increasingly difficult. My usual stoicism, my ability to compartmentalize the intense emotions of the ER, began to fray. During my first shift back, a child Chloe's age came in with a broken arm, whimpering in pain, and I had to step into the supply closet for 5 minutes to regain my composure, my breath ragged, my eyes burning. My friend Kelly, a fellow nurse, became my lifeline during those weeks, an unwavering beacon of support. She brought over dinner when I couldn't muster the energy to cook, sitting with me late at night when sleep wouldn't come, just listening, offering a quiet presence. "You don't have to be strong all the time, Eleanor," she told me during one particularly difficult evening after Chloe was asleep, her voice gentle. "Let yourself break a little. I'll help put the pieces back together." Meanwhile, Isabel's social media continued to provide damning evidence against my parents, a relentless stream of self-incrimination. A new post appeared, showing they had extended their St. Lucia stay by 3 days, despite knowing the full gravity of the situation that had erupted back home. The caption read chillingly, When paradise is too perfect to leave. Extended our stay because dah YOLO, blessed life. No regrets. Text messages from neighbors who had seen my parents loading luggage into their car the morning they abandoned Chloe further established premeditation. One neighbor, Mrs. Lawson, had even asked about Chloe when she saw them packing, and my father had claimed they were dropping her with friends for a few days. The quiet determination that had been building within me crystallized into resolute action. As St. Lucia authorities confirmed they had located my parents, the coordinated approach with Detective Miller's team was approved. Officers were prepared to confront them the following morning. That night, I sat with Chloe during her bedtime routine, carefully, gently explaining what might happen next. The police are going to talk to Grandma and Grandpa today about what they did, I explained, stroking her hair. There might be some big feelings and changes in our family because of this. Will I have to see them? Chloe asked, clutching Oliver tightly, her small voice trembling. Not unless you want to, sweetie, I promised, pulling her closer. And not without me right beside you. Your job is just to keep talking to Dr. Thompson about your feelings, and remember that none of this is your fault. Ethan said on the phone that his mom says you're being mean to Grandma and Grandpa, Chloe whispered, her small face troubled, caught between the conflicting narratives. Sometimes adults disagree about what's right, honey, I replied carefully, choosing my words with utmost precision. But my job as your mom is to make sure you're safe, and that people treat you with respect. That's what I'm doing, even if others don't understand. As Chloe finally drifted to sleep, I held her, rocking gently, my resolve hardening. I would protect her, no matter the cost. I received a text from Detective Miller at precisely 10 p.m. Virginia time. St. Lucia PD confirmed. Approach at 7 a.m. tomorrow. We'll keep you updated. The waiting was excruciating. Every minute felt like an hour, every hour an eternity. The call came at 12:04 p.m. Eastern Time, which was early morning in St. Lucia. Detective Barnes from the St. Lucia Police Department spoke with a calm professionalism that belied the dramatic scene he was describing. We've made contact with Richard and Evelyn Hayes at the Oceanside Resort and Spa, he reported, his voice clear. They're currently being interviewed about the child abandonment allegations. How did they react? I couldn't help asking. My breath hitched in my throat. Initially, with denial and confusion, Detective Barnes recounted, his tone flat. When presented with the documentation from your state CPS and your formal complaint, Mr. Hayes became defensive, while Mrs. Hayes became emotional. Standard reactions, unfortunately. He then relayed the details of the confrontation, a scene I could almost visualize unfolding in slow motion, played out against the backdrop of their luxurious vacation. It had been carefully coordinated with hotel security. 3 officers had approached room 742 at exactly 7:05 a.m., just as the first rays of sunlight were touching the ocean. Security cameras, Detective Barnes confirmed, captured the entire interaction in the hallway. The knock on their door had been firm, authoritative, cutting through the usual morning resort sounds. My father, Richard, had answered in a crisp white resort bathrobe, his hair slightly disheveled from sleep, a look of sleepy annoyance on his face. That annoyance quickly morphed to alarm, then outright shock, as Detective Barnes identified himself and the other officers. Richard Hayes, we need to speak with you and Evelyn Hayes regarding an incident involving your granddaughter, Chloe Hayes, and allegations of child abandonment in Virginia. According to Detective Barnes, my father, in a moment of desperate, almost comical denial, had attempted to close the door, stammering, "There must be some mistake. We don't know what you're talking about." The officers, calm and unyielding, prevented this, explaining they had a legal obligation to investigate the formal complaints filed. Your daughter, Eleanor Hayes, has provided documentation showing that you and your wife left your granddaughter with Child Protective Services under false pretenses before traveling to St. Lucia. Detective Barnes had stated, his voice devoid of emotion, simply stating the facts. We need to ask you some questions about this incident. My mother, Evelyn, had appeared behind my father, her hair still in rollers, her face ashen as she registered what was happening. Her meticulously constructed facade was cracking. This is ridiculous, she'd stammered, her voice thin. We made proper arrangements for Chloe. Eleanor is blowing everything out of proportion, as usual. Isabel and her family had been staying in the connecting room, and hearing the commotion, Isabel had burst through the adjoining door, her husband Bradley close behind. Their children, Ethan and Olivia, still in their pajamas, had peered around their parents, confused and frightened by the early morning disturbance, the presence of police officers. "What's going on?" Isabel had demanded, her voice shrill with alarm, her perfect vacation suddenly, irrevocably shattered. When Detective Barnes calmly explained, Isabel, for the first time, turned on my parents in disbelief, a genuine shock on her face. "You told me Eleanor knew about the arrangements. You said she was fine with Chloe staying with a friend's family." This revelation added another layer to my parents' deception. They had apparently lied to Isabel as well, manipulating her perception to maintain their flawless image. Though her willingness to believe their flimsy story without any verification, her immediate acceptance of whatever narrative fit her convenience, said much about her own priorities and her ingrained habit of deferring to our parents. As the situation escalated, my father had attempted a flimsy justification, a last-ditch effort to cling to their carefully constructed victim narrative. "We just couldn't handle her special needs," he'd claimed, his voice tinged with a desperate plea for sympathy. "Chloe requires constant attention, and we're not equipped for that at our age. We made sure she was with qualified caregivers." "She doesn't have special needs," I had told Detective Barnes during our initial interview, recounting Chloe's brief medical history. "She's a perfectly typical 8-year-old who occasionally needs her inhaler during allergy season." They knew that. My mother, Evelyn, had dissolved into tears, a theatrical display of distress, claiming they had meant to come back for her and had left contact information with the agency. Both claims, of course, were easily disproven by the meticulous documentation I had provided. The blank intake form, the lack of any return date, the false declaration of my unavailability. Isabel's intervention had grown increasingly hostile, according to Detective Barnes. "This is entirely Eleanor's fault," she'd shrieked, pointing an accusatory finger at my parents. "She dumps Chloe on Mom and Dad whenever she has shifts. They deserve a break, too." The officers had calmly explained the legal implications of what my parents had done, deliberately misrepresenting themselves as Chloe's guardians, providing false information to a government agency, and abandoning a minor without proper consent or arrangements. The hotel manager, Ellen, had arrived during this confrontation, concerned about the disturbance and the presence of police in her luxury establishment. Upon learning the circumstances, she had shown remarkable compassion, quickly offering a private conference room for the interviews to continue, away from other guests and the escalating scene. Other vacationers, drawn by the commotion, had witnessed the scene, some recording portions on their phones. One older couple, their faces etched with sympathy and outrage, had approached Detective Barnes afterward to express their disgust on Chloe's behalf. The wife, her eyes tearfully stating, "I can't imagine doing that to my grandchild. It's monstrous." My parents had been escorted from their luxury Ocean View suite to the local police station for formal questioning. They weren't technically under arrest, Detective Barnes clarified, but the gravity of the situation had finally begun to penetrate their layers of denial and self-justification. "We have arrangements to transport them back to Virginia for further legal proceedings," Detective Barnes concluded, his voice firm. "They'll be flying back tomorrow morning, though not in the first-class accommodations they had originally booked." A small grim satisfaction settled over me. Isabel's reaction, once the immediate shock wore off, had been predictable. Within an hour of my parents being escorted out, my voicemail filled with her furious, self-pitying messages. "You've completely ruined our vacation. We saved for months for this trip, and now it's destroyed because you couldn't handle your kid for 1 week without creating drama. Mom and Dad are devastated. Is this how you repay them for all the times they've helped you with Chloe? By humiliating them and having them detained by police? Ethan and Olivia are crying because police took their grandparents away. Is that what you wanted? To traumatize my children over your petty jealousy? You're disgusting." What Isabel failed to comprehend, what she willfully ignored, was that this had never been about jealousy or vacation envy. This was about protecting a child from people who had demonstrated unequivocally that they viewed her as disposable. It was about accountability. News of the incident began spreading, of course. It's impossible to keep something like that quiet in the age of social media. Other hotel guests, eager for drama, posted about the dramatic morning police scene. One particularly viral post read, "Just witnessed grandparents being confronted by police for allegedly abandoning their granddaughter to go on vacation with their favorite grandkids. Family drama going nuclear at breakfast. Esta Lucia drama. Family betrayal." The anonymity of the internet quickly turned my private trauma into a public spectacle. That evening, I sat with Chloe again to explain the developments in age-appropriate terms. It was crucial to maintain her trust, to be honest but gentle. "The police talked to Grandma and Grandpa today about what happened," I said, her small hand warm in mine. "They're coming back from St. Lucia earlier than they planned." "Are they going to jail?" Chloe asked, her eyes wide, reflecting a mixture of fear and curious confusion. "Not right now, sweetie," I explained softly. "They're just coming home so they can talk to more people about the choices they made, about how they left you and how that made you feel. Ethan texted me that his mom says you're making everyone sad because you're jealous they got to go to St. Lucia," Chloe said, her small face troubled, grappling with the conflicting narratives. My heart ached for her, caught in the middle of a war she didn't start. "This isn't about St. Lucia, Lily," I explained, choosing my words carefully, simply. "It's about making sure you're always safe and treated with respect. Sometimes adults make wrong choices, choices that hurt people, and there need to be consequences to help them understand why those choices were hurtful. My job is to protect you, and that's what I'm doing." As Chloe processed this information, I could see the complex emotions playing across her face: confusion, hurt, the innocent desire to believe the best of her grandparents, and the painful dawning recognition that their actions had been deliberately, profoundly hurtful. "If they come back, do I have to see them?" she asked finally, her voice small and tentative. "Not if you don't want to, sweetie," I assured her, pulling her close. "Your feelings are the most important part of this, and I'll respect whatever you decide. You are in control of that." That night, as a mother and daughter united against betrayal, against the very people who should have protected Chloe, we began building a new understanding of family, one based on respect, on unconditional love, and on loyalty rather than obligation, blood ties, or superficial appearances. The formal charges were filed 3 days after my parents returned from St. Lucia: child abandonment, neglect, and filing false reports to a government agency. Standing in the county courthouse, watching my father in a meticulously pressed suit and my mother in her Sunday church clothes, their faces a mask of righteous indignation and injured pride, I felt strangely detached from the angry, confused people who had raised me. They looked like strangers, actors playing a role, their usual confident posture diminished by circumstance, their carefully crafted image now shattered. The arraignment hearing was brief but intense. Judge Franklin, a stern woman with silver-streaked hair and an impassive expression, listened intently as the charges were read. My parents' attorney, an old distinguished colleague of my father's from his accounting firm, presented their defense. "Your Honor," he began, his voice smooth and practiced, "the Hayes family made a regrettable error in judgment during a profoundly stressful situation. They believed they were acting in everyone's best interest by arranging professional care for their granddaughter while taking a pre-planned family vacation. A regrettable error would be forgetting to water your neighbor's plants, Counselor," Judge Franklin responded dryly, her voice cutting through the lawyer's platitudes like a sharp knife. Her gaze, cold and direct, fixed on my parents. "Abandoning a child to state custody under false pretenses while flying to a Caribbean island suggests a pattern of deliberate choices, not a momentary lapse in judgment." My father, emboldened by his lawyer's presence, attempted to minimize their actions during his statement, his voice quavering slightly. "We just didn't think it through completely, Your Honor. We were overwhelmed with childcare responsibilities and didn't want to burden our daughter during her critical hospital shifts." The judge's response was cutting, delivered with an icy precision that left no room for doubt. "Mr. Hayes, the court has evidence that this trip was booked 3 months in advance. You had ample time to arrange appropriate childcare, or, failing that, to simply decline to watch your granddaughter. Your actions were premeditated and had devastating consequences for a vulnerable child." Isabel was notably absent from the courtroom, though her absence did not signify any remorse. She continued her barrage of texts and social media posts, portraying me as the villain who had destroyed family harmony over a simple misunderstanding, a petty grievance. The most unexpected development, however, came when Marcus, Chloe's father, suddenly reappeared in our lives, demanding an emergency custody hearing after seeing a local news story about the case. "I can provide a stable environment without all this family drama," he claimed during a tense, acrimonious phone call, his voice laced with the same self-serving righteousness I remembered so well. "Chloe deserves better than being caught in the middle of your vendetta against your parents, Eleanor. This is unhealthy." "This isn't a vendetta, Marcus," I countered, my voice low and steady, though my blood boiled. "They abandoned our daughter to foster care so they could go to St. Lucia. Where were you, by the way, during the 3 days she was traumatized by strangers? Oh, right. You were 4 months behind on child support and hadn't called her in weeks." His silence, heavy and damning, acknowledged the undeniable truth of my words. He backed down from the custody threat, muttering, "Just don't turn her against her grandparents." "Family is important, Marcus. I agree," I said, my voice firm. "So is respect. So is feeling safe. Those matter more than family titles. Those matter more than convenience." The case, of course, attracted local media attention, with one news station dubbing it the St. Lucia grandparent case. I declined all interview requests, refusing to sensationalize Chloe's trauma. My focus remained singular: Chloe's healing and our path forward. Her progress in therapy with Dr. Thompson was gradual, but meaningful, like the slow, steady blooming of a resilient flower. Initially, Chloe had expressed only sadness and confusion, a deep, pervasive hurt. But as weeks passed, with Dr. Thompson's gentle guidance, her appropriate anger finally emerged. "They lied to me," she said, during our 3rd week of family therapy sessions, her small voice firm, a newfound clarity in her eyes. "They told me you might not want me anymore because I was too much work. That was mean, and it wasn't true." Dr. Thompson helped her express these powerful, complex feelings safely, using art therapy and role play to process emotions that were difficult for an 8-year-old to verbalize. Judge Carolyn Reeves presided over the main hearing, a stern, imposing figure who listened to my testimony with an unwavering gaze. Her rebuke to my parents was stern, delivered with a gravitas that validated everything we had experienced. "The court finds the defendants' actions particularly troubling, given the position of trust they held as grandparents," she stated, her voice echoing in the quiet courtroom. This was not a momentary lapse in judgment, but a series of deliberate deceptions that caused significant emotional harm to a child. Community support, a surprising and deeply moving wave of kindness, emerged in unexpected ways. Chloe's teacher, Mrs. Na Burton, organized a class project where each student created a strength card, highlighting something wonderful about Chloe. Her folder filled with colorful reminders. "Chloe tells the best jokes. Chloe shares her snacks. Chloe helped me with math when I was confused." These small gestures, from children and their parents, were a balm to Chloe's still fragile spirit. My parents ultimately accepted a plea deal to avoid trial. 6 months of probation, mandatory family counseling, community service at a children's advocacy center, and a formal acknowledgement of wrongdoing. The relatively light legal consequences reflected the justice system's emphasis on rehabilitation over punishment in family cases, particularly when there was no physical harm. However, the social consequences, the judgment of their peers, and the community would prove far more lasting and public. The required family counseling sessions, facilitated by Dr. Harmon, a patient and insightful therapist, revealed dysfunction deeper and more entrenched than I had ever imagined. Under his skilled guidance, layers of favoritism, manipulation, and emotional neglect were exposed, peeling back years of unspoken grievances. "I've always done everything right," my mother insisted during one particularly tense session, her voice brittle with injured pride. "I raised 2 daughters, supported their activities, helped with grandchildren. One mistake shouldn't erase all that." "Marilyn, abandoning a child isn't one mistake," Dr. Harmon observed calmly, his voice unwavering. "It's the culmination of patterns of behavior, of choices made over time. The question is whether you're willing to examine those patterns honestly." Isabel's children, Ethan and Olivia, began asking uncomfortable questions that their parents struggled to answer, 10-year-old Ethan, showing an emotional maturity beyond his years, asked during a rare shared family dinner, "Why did you leave Chloe with strangers instead of taking her to St. Lucia too? Wasn't there room for her?" The painful truth, the one no one in my parents' immediate orbit wanted to acknowledge, hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. There had always been room for Chloe. She had been excluded by choice, not necessity. During discussions about a potential permanent protective order, Dr. Thompson provided crucial guidance. "Chloe needs agency in this process, Eleanor," she emphasized. At 8, she's old enough to have input into what relationship, if any, she wants with her grandparents moving forward. Her voice matters most here. The first supervised visitation was scheduled for 8 weeks after the incident. Chloe had initially refused any contact, her fear and anger still too raw. But with Dr. Thompson's patient support, she eventually agreed to a brief meeting on neutral ground. "I have some things I want to tell them," she explained, clutching a small notebook where she had worked with Dr. Thompson to express her feelings appropriately. The community center room was arranged with comfortable seating and fidget toys available for nervous energy. My parents arrived, looking smaller somehow, their usual confident posture diminished by circumstance, their faces strained. Chloe, holding my hand tightly, walked in, her small frame radiating a quiet determination. She sat opposite them, took a deep breath, and with remarkable courage, read from her prepared notes. "When you left me with strangers, you made me feel like I wasn't important." Chloe's small voice trembled slightly, but remained clear. "You made me feel scared that my mom wouldn't find me. You told me things that weren't true, that hurt me a lot." My father stared at the floor, unable to meet her gaze, while my mother dabbed at tears that seemed more for her own discomfort than for Chloe's pain. When they finally offered their apology, it focused primarily on their own embarrassment and social discomfort, rather than Lily's actual experience. "We're so sorry for all the trouble this has caused," my father began, his voice barely audible. "We never meant for things to get so out of hand or for everyone to be so upset." Dr. Thompson gently redirected, her voice calm but firm. "Perhaps you could address specifically how your actions affected Chloe's sense of security and trust, Mr. Hayes." Their struggle to center Chloe's experience rather than their own discomfort spoke volumes about the challenging road ahead. True healing for them seemed miles away. In an unexpected development, Marcus's mother, Judith, reached out to offer genuine, unconditional support. Unlike my parents, she had always treated Chloe with warmth, lavishing her with affection despite the divorce. "What they did was unforgivable, Eleanor," she stated firmly during a visit, her eyes flashing with a righteous anger. "Family doesn't mean tolerating harm. I want you both to know I'm here, whatever you need. For Chloe, always." Her unwavering support, her fierce loyalty, demonstrated the profound difference between true family bonds and mere biological connection. At work, paradoxically, the crisis had strengthened my professional standing. Jennifer, my supervisor, recommended me for a leadership position coordinating the emergency department's training program. "You've demonstrated exceptional crisis management skills and ethical decision-making under extreme pressure, Eleanor," she noted during my performance review, her gaze admiring. "Those are exactly the qualities we need in leadership." The promotion provided not just professional advancement, but practical benefits. A more consistent schedule that allowed greater stability for Chloe and financial security as we rebuilt our lives. Chloe's 9th birthday marked the first celebration of our new normal. Instead of the tension-filled, emotionally fraught family gatherings of the past, we hosted a small party with the people who had proven themselves true family. Kelly and her daughter Emma, Mrs. Rodriguez and her husband Judith, and a handful of Chloe's closest friends from school. The backyard decorations reflected Chloe's current passion for space exploration. Star-shaped cookies, a rocket-themed cake, and constellation activities that created a joyful, carefree atmosphere, miles removed from the trauma of the previous year. "Make a wish, space explorer," I encouraged, as Chloe, her face lit by the flickering candles, prepared to blow them out. She closed her eyes tightly, took a deep breath, and with a determined puff, extinguished all 9 flames, her small face radiating pure joy. While our chosen family applauded, a profound sense of peace settled over me. The healing journey had not been linear. There had been nightmares, anxiety about separations, and moments of regression, where Chloe's fears resurfaced. But there had also been remarkable resilience. Chloe had returned to dance class after initially refusing to participate in any activity that required me to leave her sight. She had formed new friendships with classmates whose parents had shown kindness and understanding during our crisis. We had created new traditions to replace the family gatherings that no longer felt safe or authentic. Sunday brunches with Kelly and Emma became a weekly highlight. Monthly movie nights with Judith brought laughter and connection. Even Mrs. Rodriguez kept in touch, inviting us to her family's Thanksgiving celebration, where Chloe bonded instantly with their teenage granddaughter who shared her burgeoning interest in astronomy. Contact with my parents remained limited and structured. After extensive consultation with Dr. Thompson, we had established firm boundaries that prioritized Chloe's emotional safety, while allowing for potential, though distant, relationship repair over time. All visits remained supervised by a family therapist, and Chloe knew, without question, that she could end any interaction that felt uncomfortable or upsetting. Isabel had made a surprising, tentative attempt at reconciliation 6 months after the incident. Her initial text had been brief, almost hesitant. "I've been doing some thinking about everything that happened. Could we talk sometime?" Our first conversation had been awkward, painful, and ultimately necessary. Sitting across from each other at a neutral coffee shop, Isabel, for the first time, had finally acknowledged some uncomfortable truths. "I didn't want to believe Mom and Dad could do something so awful," she admitted, her voice soft, vulnerable. "It was easier to blame you than accept that they've been playing favorites all these years, that what happened to Chloe was a culmination of that." "The favoritism wasn't your fault, Isabel," I pointed out gently. "But your silence, your unwillingness to see it, enabled it to continue." "Ethan asked me why we never noticed how Chloe was treated differently," Isabel said, staring into her untouched coffee, her eyes distant. "He said it wasn't fair and we should have done something. I had no good answer for him." My boundaries remained firm, despite this opening. "I appreciate you reaching out, Isabel. I truly do," I said, my voice kind but resolute. "But rebuilding trust will take time, and consistent actions, not just words." "What would that look like?" she asked, a flicker of genuine curiosity in her eyes. "Treating Chloe with the same consideration you give your own children," I explained. "Acknowledging the harm done without minimizing it, supporting her healing without centering your own feelings about the situation." The ongoing family therapy sessions with my parents had produced mixed results. 6 months into the process, my father experienced what appeared to be a genuine breakthrough. During a particularly intense session, his voice, usually so clipped and controlled, broke. "I have no excuses," he said, tears streaming down his face, perhaps for the first time in my memory. We treated Chloe as less important from the beginning, because she reminded us of our disappointment in Eleanor's choices. The unplanned pregnancy, the divorce, the struggling single motherhood. We saw all that as failure, and we projected it onto her. "Chloe is not a representation of my choices," I responded, my voice firm, tears welling in my own eyes at his unexpected admission. "She's a complete person, deserving of love and respect regardless of the circumstances of her birth or my marital status." "I know that now," he acknowledged, his voice choked with emotion. "I just don't know if I can ever make it right." The genuine remorse in his voice marked the first step in actual healing, though the path remained long and uncertain. My mother's journey proved more challenging. Her identity had been so thoroughly built around appearances and social standing, around being the perfect mother and grandmother, that acknowledging the fundamental wrongness of their actions threatened her entire self-concept. "We had good intentions," remained her refrain, a stubborn defense, despite months of therapy. "We thought we were doing what was best for everyone." Dr. Harmon's patience was admirable as he repeatedly redirected. "Evelyn, good intentions don't abandon children to foster care. Let's explore what was really happening in that decision." She struggled deeply to relinquish her carefully constructed narrative. The final court hearing, a follow-up to monitor the plea deal's progress, featured a moment that changed everything. Judge Reeves, during a quiet recess, had invited Chloe to share her perspective if she felt comfortable doing so. After careful preparation with Dr. Thompson, Chloe, tiny but formidable, had bravely approached the bench. "I want my grandparents to know that what they did made me feel like I wasn't good enough," she said clearly, her small voice echoing in the silent courtroom. "Not because I did anything wrong, but because they couldn't see how special I am. I'm working on forgiving them because Dr. Thompson says forgiveness is for me, not them. But I need them to really understand how bad it felt to think nobody wanted me." The simple, profound truth from an 8-year-old's perspective seemed to accomplish what months of therapy, legal proceedings, and adult arguments had not. For the first time, my parents appeared to truly grasp the impact of their actions, beyond the legal consequences and social embarrassment. My father broke down, his shoulders shaking. My mother's carefully composed facade crumbled, genuine tears streaming down her face, not of self-pity, but of sorrow. The greatest growth, though, happened between Chloe and me. Our bond, tested by circumstances neither of us could have anticipated, emerged stronger and more secure than ever before. The trust between us deepened as she experienced firsthand that my love was unconditional, my promises kept. "Mom," she said one night as I tucked her in, her voice soft and sleepy, "I'm not scared anymore when you go to work. I know you'll always come back for me." Those words, simple yet profound, represented the most important healing of all. The broken pieces of our world had been put back together, stronger and more beautiful than before. We had created a family of choice around us, friends who had proven their loyalty, colleagues who had offered support without judgment, even strangers like the Rodriguez family who had shown extraordinary kindness during our darkest moments. Looking toward the future, I saw a path that honored the difficult journey while refusing to be defined by it. Chloe was flourishing academically, her natural curiosity reignited as emotional security returned. The promotion at work provided stability and growth opportunities. Most importantly, the painful experience had clarified what truly mattered in life: integrity, respect, and unfailing love. The wisdom gained through this ordeal could be distilled to something both simple and profound. Family is defined by actions, not titles or blood. The people who stand beside you when everything falls apart, who offer unwavering support and love, are your true family, regardless of what name they carry. Sometimes the hardest battles teach us our greatest strengths. "You've shown more courage than many adults ever find, Chloe," I told her one evening, as we watched the sunset from our backyard, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple. "Because I had you showing me how, Mom," she replied, leaning against my shoulder, her small hand finding mine. And in that moment, I knew that despite everything, despite the betrayal, the pain, the public spectacle, we had found our way. We had found our way to something beautiful and true.